791st Contact Sunday, 23rd January 2022, 9:56 p.m.
You are probably right, because that is what it boils down to, because by adopting such a provision, the media would become dependent on the state, and would be even more obliged to spread the lies of those who are the bait talkers in government and who persuade or overcharge the other government figures for this and that. Furthermore, it is to be said, as I have already mentioned in the course of the last few years, that with every new government that comes to power, there are so and so many persons who want to perpetuate themselves in a bemouthed way and who also do so. They do so by inventing new legislation and putting it to the vote with lies of alleged necessity, which is then accepted by the misguided, misinformed, even non-thinking and propaganda-loving electorate and affirmed as a provision or law. But enough of that, because logic, understanding and reason are unfortunately not inherent in the majority of the population. Consequently, they act according to and muddle through the state in the way that those somewhat clever and unpredictable power-hungry elements of the rulers do, who can play out their personal might over all other rulers and over the people. Thus, the weaker of the rulers dance to the tango of those stronger ones who can set the tone and use their co-rulers as puppet creatures and convince or overscrounge and blend them to the nonsense of the new orders, regulations, and laws, and so on. Now, however, I want to talk about what the future will bring in terms of the ignorance and irrationality of the majority of the earthlings, who can be told and warned as much as they like about what the future will bring, but who will simply be thrown to the wind without being heard. One speaks as if into the desert, for everything is lost unheard in nowhere, for apparently the ears are simply closed and nothing is heard when the talk turns to what the future will bring if one continues to think and act superficially as before. Instead of thinking, deciding and acting independently and rationally, the earthlings cling to an insane religious belief in a dear God and hope in vain that this fantasy figure, invented out of a false understanding of reality, will already fix everything and help everything to work. A belief in something imaginary that never ever exists and can never help because it is unreal and only invented as a product of fantasy and completely devoid of energy and power for all time. The truth concerning a belief in God is that it has the human being completely in its grip and makes him absolutely unfree in his thinking. Consequently, he is stupid and remains so until one day he can free himself from it. But that takes a lot and is also very rare, because as a rule religious faith is enshrined in human beings in such a way that, as a delusion, it erroneously accepts something imaginary or non-real or even non-truthful as truth, to which enormous importance is attached, but which cannot and never can be proven to be truth, because it is imaginary. Religious faith is effectively an uncontrollable delusion, which shows a much more profound misjudgment of reality than normal faith, which is simply based on hearsay or unconsciously told lies, which are simply accepted and championed by the believing human beings as certain truth. Believing human beings are thus deceived consciously or unconsciously, because the other person may also be a believer without there ever being any real, objective evidence for what is religiously said, as is the case with religious faith. Another form of faith collapses when it is based on the assumption of lies that are uncovered and reveal the effective truth, which does not happen with religious faith. This is written, for example, in the so-called Holy Scripture, the Bible, and specifically in the fifth commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," but this is nevertheless done by the believer's interest, as punishment as well as revenge and open or secret murder and manslaughter. "Thou shalt not kill," it is written in the fifth commandment of the Bible but one. This commandment is misrepresented, for it is thoroughly falsified what Moses once said, and two. It applies to everything that is not only doubtful but contradicts all logic, for it revokes everything said. 1. So the Bible forbids killing, at least that's what it says in the Ten Commandments, but that is just a stupid speech without logic, understanding and reason, because on the other hand the Bible, that is to say as a result of the Old Testament legislation, allows the killing of a human being again, which the believer in Christ would have to think about for once. The fifth commandment, "Thou shalt not kill," actually only consists of two words in Hebrew which say nothing about what is actually meant by "thou shalt not kill." But when the words "do not kill" are read, everything sounds very forceful. The "do not" alone makes a deep impression on some human beings, because it was supposedly said by God. But there are also slaying and killing, which are also used as killing, as it is common, for example, as "not thou shalt murder" in another form. However, there is also paradoxically permitted killing in the Old Testament interpretation of the law, for example the killing of animals if they are needed for food. Also the killing of animals, creatures and other non-human life forms. Is this permitted or not according to this fifth commandment? What is not clear, however, is what about human sacrifice, as well as in self-defense, in war and in the application and execution of the death penalty, is that permitted, and so on. The fifth commandment of thou shalt not kill is therefore a rubber term and absolutely nonsensical. It apparently only prohibits a certain kind of killing which is expressed in Hebrew by the word rezach. Because it is not an official law but only a religious commandment, it suggests that intentional murder should not be permitted, that is to say killing simply for the sake of killing. But it does not in any way exclude the right to, for example, manslaughter and blood revenge, as is common practice among believers in Islam, for example, where possible legal proceedings are intended to protect the murderers. This makes it clear that the commandment thou shalt not kill is a nonsensical word through which a motive decides the will and woe of the perpetrator. This becomes clear, for example, in the following Num. 359-11 sentence, which I will try to reproduce, but which will not be entirely correct. But the Lord said unto Moses, Speak now unto the children of Israel, and declare unto them, that when ye go over Jordan into Canaan, then ye must appoint some places to be cities of asylum. One may then flee there if he has slain a human being unintentionally. The Hebrew word rezach does not actually describe killing in terms of whether it is done intentionally or unintentionally. Therefore, it should actually read thou shalt not murder instead of thou shalt not kill, because under everything is effectively premeditated murder. That is my logical thinking and understanding. The commandment is, in my opinion, worded in such a way that it does not specify whom it forbids to kill at all. For example, it says something like the following in Exodus 21:12: Whoever strikes a human being in such a way that he dies as a result, he deserves death. So a law is mentioned that describes an act, that one human being slays another, a fellow human being. And for this an act of revenge is demanded, which is clearly declared as a punishment, namely the death penalty. The fifth commandment, on the other hand, thou shalt not kill, is a categorical demand that no one should be punished by death. Nevertheless, many devout Christians advocate the death penalty and scream and howl frenetically as spectators when a human being is executed. Every society needs its order, and for that it needs rules, because without them everything goes haywire. The Ten Commandments, which Moses devised and introduced, served this purpose, not an alleged or imaginary God the Father. However, they did not bring any truthful successes, because in the deepest core of their character, the human beings did not change anything, because they only changed their outward behavior in such a way that they behaved more decently towards their fellow human beings, at least as long as they kept peace with each other. It remained so, however, that as soon as one word gave the other in discord, the true wisdom immediately burst forth from the depths of the character, and murder and manslaughter were committed, and this is so to this day. But hitherto the Ten Commandments have not been fulfilled inwardly in character. Moses was a human being who saw further and thought further than the tip of his nose, and knew that humans formed their wisdom of character from the ground up themselves and then lived their lives accordingly. So he did a great thing when he created the Ten Commandments, which I respected and followed all my life because I knew that they were correct, which is why I can still mention them today, although Moses devised and presented them to the people differently than they are listed in the Bible. In word and truth, unfortunately, what he said was not understood. Consequently, everything was misinterpreted, falsified and written down for a long time after he was murdered. The truth of the commandments were in fact those, as I can no longer reproduce them in order and word for word, as Moses said. 1. I myself am Lord over myself, and never shall there be a God beside me or above me. 2. Never shall you take your name in vain by lying or by making a fool of yourself. 3. Thou shalt always strive to do what is right and good. 4. Do not lust after the goods of your neighbor. 5. Thou shalt do the duties of thy daily life without grumbling. 6. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. 7. Thou shalt honor thy parents according to their worth. 8. Thou shalt never kill willingly in anger, as punishment, blood vengeance, revenge in greed or war. 9. You shall not steal your neighbor's goods. 10 Thou shalt not break thy bond of companionship. With the commandment mentioned in the Bible, Moses clearly stated that justice can be done with it, because no killing of any human being his kind is to be allowed. It does not define anything that would justify the killing of a human being. Consequently, also no legal case could arise that would allow extenuating circumstances. Furthermore, the penalty for killing a human being would have to be uniformly the same, or for a verifiable murder, and thus a gradation of the penalty should never come to light, because murder always remains murder for whatever reason. Everything else about graduated sentencing for murder is wrong and inadmissible.